Good morning and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. This is the NCAA Eligibility Center staff, and we just want to begin with a great hearty welcome and thank you for joining us for spending an hour today of your time to discuss initial eligibility requirements specific to our homeschooled college-bound student athletes. We're very excited to put this webinar on for you today. And I just want to do a couple housekeeping reminders as you saw on the previous slide. Reminder that your mics are muted as well as your cameras are turned off. So if during the course of the presentation you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A button chat feature, and our staff here at the Eligibility Center will be answering questions live throughout the presentation. I'm going to go ahead and start by introducing myself. My name is Amy Rout. That's me on the left-hand side of your screen. I'm an associate director in the group, the high school review group here at the Eligibility Center. I have been with the Eligibility Center for 15 years, and prior to that was a high school chemistry and physics teacher here in the Indianapolis area. And once again, a big thank you for joining us today. I'm going to turn it over to my co-presenter to do his introduction, and he's going to get us started today.
Thank you, Amy. My name is Matt Harris. I am an assistant director of high school review in the NCAA Eligibility Center. I've been here for almost 10 years. In fact, my 10-year anniversary is coming up in a few weeks, and we are really happy that you've decided to join us today. I'm going to get us started and talk a little bit about some general NCAA Eligibility Center facts, and we'll talk about registration with the Eligibility Center and some core course requirements and certification outcomes. And then I'll hand it back over to Amy, who will talk about some homeschool specific items to help navigate this process for all of you. So we're really glad that you've joined us today. So the NCAA Eligibility Center is a unit within the NCAA National Office here in Indianapolis, Indiana. And what we do is provide academic and amateurism certification for college-bound student athletes. And we're going to talk about some general academic requirements that apply to all student athletes, both homeschool and non-homeschool student athletes. So the NCAA is made up of 3 divisions, Division 1, 2, and 3. And on your screen, you can see some facts and figures about what differentiates the 3 divisions, both in undergraduate enrollment size, the number of students who are student athletes within each division, and the number of athletic teams per school in these divisions. So it gives you a little bit of an idea of how these divisions differ. And we'll talk quite a bit here in a few minutes about the differences between Division 1 and Division 2 specifically as student athletes are thinking about where they might want to go after high school. So when you're thinking about choosing the school you want to attend, there are so many different factors, specifically the size and location of the school. What do you want to study? What is the cost? What kind of sports are offered, playing time, all those different kinds of things. So in addition to thinking about the core course requirements that we're going to go over today, there are so many other factors about the whole experience that students should be considering. Throughout the presentation today, you're going to see a lot of links, and here on this screen we have one to an interactive map where you can look at the location of different NCAA schools. We encourage you to use those links and visit the Eligibility Center website as well. Everything that we're going over today is there for you, and these resources are really helpful when you're choosing how you want to proceed with your NCAA school selection. So this is a really important slide here, talking about college admission. What we're going to be talking about today is meeting the NCAA initial eligibility requirements as they pertain to academics. However, it's really important to differentiate between meeting NCAA requirements and college admission requirements. Student athletes, just because they meet the NCAA initial eligibility requirements, that does not mean they've been admitted to their college of choice. So it's really important to still apply and make sure that the student athlete is accepted to their college in addition to meeting the NCAA requirements. So it's still important, just like with non-student athletes, to ask questions about financial aid, the total cost of attendance, standardized test scores. That's a big question right now that we get from a lot of our student athletes. We no longer require a standardized test score as part of the NCAA eligibility process. However, your college or university might require it. So it's important to ask those questions when you're thinking about the school that you'd like to attend. All right, let's talk about registration. You see on the screen, register before freshman year. That's a great recommendation. We're going to talk about the ways to register, but even if you are beyond freshman year, your student athlete is beyond freshman year, that's okay. You can register for the NCAA at any point in your high school career. When you choose to register, and this is for any student athlete who thinks they might want to play sports in college, even if you aren't quite sure what path you'd like to take, we have multiple registration, multiple account types. So we're going to start by talking about the free profile page account. We'll get into the academic and amateurism certification account, and the amateurism certification account, the number 3 on your screen there. We'll talk a little bit about that. So let's talk about the free profile page account. This is for any student athlete who maybe isn't sure the path they want to take or isn't sure they even want to play sports in college. This is the right path for you. The profile page is absolutely free. It's a great way to start because there's no cost, no obligation. You can go to the Eligibility Center website right now and register for this free profile page account. Maybe you're a student athlete who either isn't sure they want to play sports in college, or maybe you think you're on a Division III track. We'll get into this a little bit later, but Division III student athletes do not have to have an NCAA certification. And the reason for that is because Division III schools do not offer athletic scholarships. So we don't certify Division III domestic student athletes. But if you're not really sure the track that you're on, a free profile page is the way to start. The great thing is you get your NCAA ID number, and this account can be transferred to the certification account, which is what we're going to talk about next. That can be done at any time throughout your high school career. So the academic and amateurism certification account. This is the account that a student athlete must have to play sports at the Division I or Division II level. In addition to that, to go on official visits while they're in high school, to sign the national letter of intent, and then ultimately to receive that athletic scholarship, a student athlete must have the amateurism and academic certification account. There is a fee associated with this account. You can see on your screen, it is $100 for domestic students, $160 for international students. There are fee waiver options, and you can visit the eligibility website, Eligibility Center website, to see if your student might qualify for a fee waiver. I mentioned this briefly, the amateurism only student athlete. This would be for an international student athlete who is planning to compete at the Division III level. There is a fee for that, and you can see at the bottom of your screen, a student athlete who's transferring from a 2-year school, so maybe a junior college, to a Division I or II school, who didn't require an Eligibility Center academic certification. This would be the account for that student athlete. But for most student athletes, I'll go back here, this amateurism or academic and amateurism certification account, this is the one you want to focus on if you are on a Division I or Division II track. So let's talk about the institutional request list. We call it the IRL. And what this is a list of student athletes that a particular college is recruiting. In order to receive a certification, so you've registered, you have that academic and amateurism certification account. In order to actually receive a certification, a student athlete must be on a school's IRL. You have to do that in order to receive an athletic scholarship, to practice and to compete in your first year at college. So this institutional request list is simply a list that a college has of the student athletes they are recruiting. And in order to be on this IRL, you have to have that academic and amateurism certification account. And I know that we're going through this really pretty quickly. Just a reminder that if you have questions about any of these things, please put them in the Q&A, and our staff will be happy to answer those as best they can. So if we have to go over something quickly or something's not clear, please throw those questions into the Q&A. So specific to homeschool student athletes, this is a really important delineation here on your screen. Homeschooling versus schooling at home. These things kind of sound the same, but in terms of the NCAA, these are very different things. So we consider a homeschool student athlete to be a student athlete who is being taught by a parent or guardian or a tutor who creates the curriculum. They are the ones teaching the course, and they assess the coursework and award the grades and credit. In terms of the NCAA, this is a homeschooled student athlete. Schooling at home can be a little bit different, especially for students who maybe were home during COVID. We had a lot of students who schooled at home, but weren't really considered homeschooled student athletes. And you can see the description there on your screen. Just because you're learning at home doesn't necessarily mean that you are a homeschool student athlete in terms of the NCAA eligibility process. A lot of student athletes may learn at home through an online school with online teachers, and that online school might have an NCAA account, in which case you wouldn't be considered a homeschooled student athlete. So if you are a homeschool student athlete, here are your registration tips. It's really important that you pay attention to these questions about the schools you attended. So if you register and indicate that you are a homeschooled student athlete, in that NCAA account, you will be assigned tasks. These are questions that the NCAA is asking you. You should log into that account, respond to those tasks with the required documentation. Amy's going to get into that specifically here in just a little bit, but it's really important that you report all schools attended. A lot of student athletes might be homeschooled for part of their high school career, but might attend either an online school or a brick and mortar school during other parts of their high school career. So it's really important to note all of the different schools that you've attended. And you can use a school search feature. You can go to the eligibility website, the Eligibility Center website, and search to see if your school, again, whether it's an online school or a brick and mortar school, to see if that school has an NCAA account. If they do, that school, they will have an account that has approved core courses that can be used, and so those wouldn't be considered homeschool courses. So let's talk specifically about core courses, what that means, what are the requirements in each division and the different outcomes. So a core course, first of all, has to meet NCAA core course legislation. I won't bore you with the details of the legislation, but basically these are courses that are taught in the subject areas you see on your screen: English, math at the Algebra 1 level or higher, science, social studies, world language, comparative religion, and philosophy. So courses must be taught and receive graduation credit in one of those subject areas. The course also must be considered four-year college preparatory, and it must be at or above the regular academic level to be considered an NCAA core course. So for Division I, it's very important to note the time limitation on these courses. A lot of the information you see on the screen might be a little confusing, but it is important for a Division I student athlete as they're thinking about their track through high school. So in order to receive an NCAA certification and be able to play, practice, and receive athletics aid in Division I, a student athlete must complete 16 core courses in those subject areas. For Division I, 10 of those 16 core courses have to be completed before the start of the student athlete's senior year. So 16 total, 10 prior to the start of senior year. And of those 10, 7 of those 10 must be in English, math, or science. That's what we call the 10-7 requirement. So 10 core courses completed prior to the start of senior year, 7 of which must be in English, math, or science. Now, for most student athletes who are on a regular graduation track, they're going to meet that requirement anyway. However, it is a requirement for students who are going to play at the Division I level. So as students are navigating course scheduling and deciding which courses they're going to take, it's important to note whether you're meeting this requirement and thinking about the courses you want to take if you're on a Division I track. Okay, so we know what a core course is. What are the outcomes? What do I have to do to be able to compete at the Division I or Division II level? So for the Division I level, there are 3 outcomes for student athletes: a qualifier, an academic redshirt, or a non-qualifier. And I'm going to touch briefly on what each of those things means. So Division I qualifier, and this is what students want to shoot for. This is a student athlete who, once they have completed high school, they are eligible to practice, play, and receive athletic scholarships in his or her first year in college. To be a Division I qualifier, a student athlete must complete 16 core courses in the subject areas I showed a few slides ago. They have to meet that 10.7 requirement, and the core course GPA in those 16 core courses must be 2.3 or higher. Now, it's important to note that that is not necessarily the student's overall GPA. That is the GPA only in those core courses. So the grade that a student athlete received, maybe in a music or an art course, those might count toward the student's overall school GPA or homeschool GPA, but that doesn't factor into the core course GPA. So the GPA in those 16 core courses must be 2.3 or higher in order to become a Division I qualifier. And then when the student graduates, he or she will need to submit proof of graduation to the Eligibility Center. So the 16 core courses, you can see the breakdown on the screen. Of those 16, 4 have to be English, 3 math at the Algebra 1 level or higher, 2 science, 1 extra English, math, or science, 2 social studies, and then the other 4 can be in any of these subject areas or world language, comparative religion, and philosophy. It's important to note that comparative religion, that would be like a world religions type course, not a specific Bible course, for example. Those would not count towards certification. So the next outcome for a Division I student athlete would be an academic redshirt. Now, an academic redshirt is a student athlete who is eligible to practice and receive an athletics scholarship in his or her first year in college, but is not eligible to compete. So an academic redshirt is a student athlete who has completed the 16 core courses in the required subject areas, but the GPA in those core courses was 2.0 to 2.29. So basically, they fell a little bit short of that 2.3 GPA. And then the student athlete graduates on time and provides that proof of graduation. So that student would become an academic redshirt. And then the final outcome would be a non-qualifier. And this would be a student athlete who is not eligible to practice, to play, or receive an athletic scholarship. And this is a student athlete who either fell short of the 16 core course requirement or fell short of that 2.0 GPA in their 16 core courses. So for Division II, it's a little bit simpler. There are only 2 possible outcomes, qualifier and partial qualifier. Now I will, as an aside, the partial qualifier, it means the same thing as an academic redshirt. Division I and Division II have different governing bodies, so they call it a different thing, but it means the same thing. So Division II qualifier, again, this is a student athlete who is eligible to practice, compete, and receive an athletic scholarship in the first year in college. Like Division I, this student athlete must complete 16 core courses in those required subject areas, but the GPA in those core courses for Division II only needs to be 2.2 or higher, not 2.3, and the student athlete must provide proof of graduation to the Eligibility Center. So the subject area breakdown for Division II, a little bit different than Division I. You can see 3 English, 2 math, 2 science, 3 extra English, math, or science. So it could be one of each of those 3, or it can be divided any way among those 3. 2 social studies, and then 4 additional in any of these areas, again, or world language, comparative religion, or philosophy. And then a partial qualifier, again, this is a student athlete who is eligible to receive an athletic scholarship and practice in his or her first year in college, but is not eligible to compete. A partial qualifier must graduate and provide proof of graduation, but if he or she were to fall short of the core course requirement or the GPA requirement, they would be deemed a partial qualifier at the Division II level. There is no non-qualifier for Division II. I mentioned earlier Division III. We do not perform academic certifications for Division III student athletes because each Division III institution has their own requirements for academic admission, for athletic eligibility, and financial aid. For student athletes who are international athletes and want to compete at Division III, they will need to register for that amateurism only certification account that I mentioned briefly a few minutes ago. So now I'm going to throw it over to Amy, who's going to talk a little bit about homeschool specific information. And again, I remind you that As you have questions about anything I've discussed or anything Amy goes over, please throw those in the Q&A, and our folks answering those questions will get answers to you as soon as possible. And please utilize the resources you see on the screen. They will be very helpful in going over everything we've had to cover pretty quickly. So Amy, I'll give it over to you.
Thanks, Matt. I just wanted to start off by saying thank you to Matt for doing a very high-level coverage of the initial eligibility requirements. And keep in mind, those requirements are for all students, not just homeschool student athletes. So I did want to point that out. So right now we're going to shift our focus and we're going to talk specifically about the things that homeschool student athletes need to be aware of and need to provide through that initial eligibility review process. So everything that Matt previously talked about is for all students, regardless of homeschool or not. So now we're going to focus on those specific resources and documentation that we need from homeschool student athletes. So first and foremost, I want to highlight the homeschool toolkit. As you can see here, this was recently republished this August. We redo that every year and make updates to it. So this is the most current edition on your screen. This is literally the best resource for homeschool student athletes, homeschool administrators, parents, and guardians who are working and helping those students transition from that homeschool student athlete experience to potentially that Division I or Division II college participation athletic experience. So this is where you want to go when you have questions. Information included in this document is how to determine, as Matt talked about, if you're subject to the homeschool review process. Am I a homeschooled student, or am I a schooling at home student who would not be subject to that homeschool review? If you are subject to the homeschool review, we will also have in this resource the different types of documentation that's required in order to present to the Eligibility Center. And I'm going to go through each of those document types, as well as instructions and best practices and submission process. And finally, there is an extensive list of resources and FAQs to help guide you as you navigate this process specific to your young person. So let's start by talking about the 3 documents that are required for all homeschooled student athletes. Number 1, makes sense, is a transcript. This is required for all students, regardless if they're homeschooled or not. A homeschool transcript can either be submitted by you as their parent or guardian, or we consider that their homeschool administrator, or if you're choosing to use an umbrella program, you can also submit a transcript from an umbrella program. It is important to note that you do not have to provide an umbrella transcript. You are more than welcome to create your own transcript for your student, as you are their parent/guardian who is serving as their homeschool administrator. So I wanted to highlight the fact that we will accept either of those transcript creation types. The second document that's required for all students, regardless of whether they use an umbrella program or not, is that administrator in accordance statement. And I'll go into more detail of what that document is and what it's asking for and why we request it. And then finally, this is the piece that's probably the most important. This helps us determine those 16 core courses that Matt just went through with you in terms of those initial eligibility requirements. Each core course that your student would like to present to have considered for their certification must be completed on a separate worksheet. So please don't combine all 4 English courses onto one worksheet or all 16 core courses onto one worksheet. There has to be an individual worksheet for each core course that you would like considered for the academic certification. It's important to note that if a course is completed via an online or hybrid instructional model, there's a separate worksheet that is called the non-traditional core course worksheet, which is actually linked here. Matt referenced earlier that all the blue highlights you see throughout our presentation will be live links that will direct you to additional information. And I'll talk more in detail about those non-traditional core course worksheets and some best practices when completing those, if applicable for your student athlete. So let's take a deeper dive into the homeschool transcript. These images that you're going to see on the next few slides are taken directly from our most recent version of our homeschool toolkit. So if you want to refer back to these and you don't necessarily have the webinar at an easy click, you can use that toolkit as well, and you'll see these exact documents as well. The homeschool transcript, as I referred to, you can either create that yourself as the parent or guardian who is the homeschool administrator, or you can employ an umbrella program to do that for you. Either way, there are certain things that have to be present on that transcript in order for it to be considered official and in order for our team to be able to use it. First and foremost, demographic information. That makes sense. The student's name, their address, phone number, those types of pieces of information. We also request that you put the 9th grade start date, and that is when students enroll in ninth grade for the first time, not necessarily when they start homeschooling for the first time. We see a lot of students who do a hybrid model where perhaps they started in a brick and mortar school or a non-traditional program online and then transitioned to homeschool later in education. So that ninth grade start date is not when they started homeschool, but instead when they actually started ninth grade. So I wanted to make sure I highlighted that today. Also, academic records, super important. Probably the most important thing is we need to know the academic record of your student athlete. So which courses did they take in ninth grade and what academic year is that ninth grade? What are the actual course titles? What is the grade and the credit that they earned? If you report numeric grades on your transcript, it is important that you provide us a numeric grading scale either on this transcript as it is demonstrated here in the image or in your documentation, because our certification team will convert numeric to alpha and alpha to quality points. And that's how we calculate that core course GPA. So while alpha is super helpful, it's not necessarily required. If you report numeric, just make sure you provide that scale information as well. And then finally, a transcript has to be signed. If it is a transcript that is created by a parent or guardian, it should be signed by that parent or guardian. If it is an umbrella transcript, then obviously the umbrella administrator is the appropriate person to sign that. So let's talk about the second required documentation. That's that administrator and accordance statement. This statement is super important. It affirms how the homeschool courses were completed and also attests to the validity of the program. In other words, did you follow your state's homeschool law? So at the top of the field, you'll be asked to explain what the role of this parent was in the homeschool program. There's several check boxes that you'll fill out. And that basically just tells us who managed the homeschool program, who taught the courses, who evaluated, and then who obviously created the final transcript. Regardless of who fills out this form, if you are using an umbrella and you have the umbrella administrator fill out the top portion of the form, it must be signed by a parent or guardian at the bottom. If it is not signed by a parent or guardian, we will ask for a copy that does have that parent or guardian signature added to it. So I just wanted to highlight that for this particular document, we do have to have a parent or guardian signature at the bottom of this document. And then lastly, these are those core course worksheets. This is the piece that's really the piece of the puzzle that puts it all together. So you only need to submit a core course worksheet for courses in which the parent or guardian or tutor plans, delivers, and instructs, determines the student's comprehension by providing grades or assessments of those grades, determines the overall grade achieved, and either places that grade on a transcript or a grade report to a transcripting agency or entity. So what we're looking for is the courses that the parent taught themselves and not those courses that were taught at an outside entity, such as dual enrollment or maybe through a different non-traditional program. And I'll talk more about that in a moment, but I want to make it clear that the core course worksheets are only needed for the core courses that are taught by the parent or the guardian in the homeschooling process. So let's go into greater detail of the core course worksheet. Okay, it's important to note that currently there is no pre-approved homeschool curriculum. So all homeschool students will be required to provide these worksheets for courses that are taught through the homeschool model. Worksheets, we use the worksheets to determine if the course meets our NCAA core course legislation that Matt explained previously. So the idea that they receive graduation credit in one of those areas: English, math, science, social studies, world language, comparative religion, and philosophy. And then we also use the information on the core course worksheets to cross-check with the transcripts to make sure that everything aligns. So on the worksheets, you're asked to provide the name of the course, when the student took the course, the grade awarded to the course, and the credit awarded to the course. That information is cross-checked with what's on your transcript. And if for some reason that information doesn't match, we will assign a follow-up task to your student and their student account in order to clarify. Perhaps the grade on the core course worksheet says B, but the grade on the transcript says A, and we need to know which of those two grades we should be entering. So if you ever see a task like that, we're just trying to make sure that we're clear as to what the grade and credit was actually awarded. So since we've been talking about the core course worksheets, let's talk about those non-traditional core course worksheets. If students are using an online or blended model, using an online provider, but then maybe you're doing a little supplemental teaching or instructing on the back end or assessment, you would want to complete the non-traditional core course worksheets. There is a list of providers that are considered non-traditional homeschool curriculum providers in the toolkit. So if you're using any of those particular providers listed there, you would want to complete the non-traditional core course worksheets. Typically speaking, if there is an online or hybrid nexus, these are the worksheets that you want to provide. If you have questions, I would encourage you to call our customer service line to make sure you're completing the correct worksheets. That said, I want to go through some best practices with these worksheets because I know just having interacted with homeschool parents over the last couple of years using these worksheets, I think there's maybe some confusion or misconception about how to answer these questions. So first and foremost, when you're answering these questions, you want to answer the questions about how the student actually completed the courses. So for example, one of the questions on the worksheet says, can students be exempted or test out of modules? While the program may allow it, if your student didn't do that, then that is your answer. No, my student was not permitted or allowed to test out of modules. Sometimes we see the responses given as to how the program operates, but not necessarily how you use the program with your students. So when you provide those responses, tell us how you use that program with your students. Another thing I want to highlight is you want to pay special attention to the responses around the frequency and nature of student-teacher interaction. There's two pieces there. Typically, when people respond to this question, they tell us the frequency, once a week, ongoing, daily, monthly, whatever the case may be, but they don't explain the nature. What are students doing with the teachers when they meet weekly or daily or ongoing? Are they meeting for the purposes of instruction? Are they meeting to answer questions? Are they meeting to do an evaluation of the student? Are they doing DBAs? Whatever that interaction is, please describe what it is, not just how often it occurs. If you don't tell us what it is, then we'll probably need to go back and clarify that with you through that task process that I've mentioned a couple times through this presentation. Couple special scenarios that we hear asked a lot, not just by homeschooled student athletes, but by student athletes in general, is pre-9th coursework. Courses that are completed that are high school courses taken prior to 9th grade may be used in that initial academic certification towards those 16 core courses that Matt spelled out for you. Couple things I want to note about them. Number one, that course would need to appear on your homeschool transcript, and it would need to appear with a grade and high school credit awarded. If the grade is a P or a CR indicating the student gets a pass, we would award a lowest passing grade or a D in this case. So whatever the grade is, that needs to be there with high school credit. Also keep in mind, it still needs to meet core course requirements. So it would still need to be a course that received graduation requirements in English, math, science, social studies, world language, comparative religion, and philosophy. And it's also important to note that if the course is completed pre-9th or completed via homeschool, we would still need a core course worksheet for those. If those courses completed pre-9th were completed at a brick and mortar school or another online provider that has an account with us, you would not need to provide a core course worksheet. So in general, I will use the statement of if the course is completed via homeschooling where the parent or guardian is involved in the instruction, the evaluation, the grading, and the transcription, those courses would always need a core course worksheet provided that they are core. For courses that are completed through other entities, you would not need to provide a core course worksheet. Another special scenario that we're going to talk about is college coursework. This is very similar in terms of the policy as our pre-9th policy that we just went through. These are what we call dual enrollment courses. We see lots of homeschool students present these types of courses where they are enrolling in a local college, maybe a community college, as maybe a sophomore, a junior, or senior to get a head start on earning those college credits, which is great because if you can earn a little college credit in high school and you don't have to take so many in college, you can start your major degree sooner, or it might even help save costs because you're not taking as many hours when you're in college. So we know why students do that. Should students take dual enrollment courses, those also can be used in the initial eligibility certification, those 16 core courses that Matt explained previously. Same as those pre-9th courses, they would need to appear on your homeschool transcript with grade and high school credit awarded. Now this part's really important because most college courses, they would be given 3 hours, 2 hours, 1 hour. So that's doesn't convert to us for high school credit. So that's why that high school credit is super important. So if a student takes an economics course at the local community college and they give it 3 seat hours. We need to know, how are you awarding that on your transcript? Is that a full academic credit for homeschool, or is that a half academic credit? So that's, we're going to defer to what you put on your homeschool transcript. One thing that's also important to note is that you need to provide the dual enrollment transcript from the college or university as part of your certification in order for these courses to be used. So you'll provide the homeschool transcript, which would have that college course title, grade, and credit on there, but then you would also send us the transcript from the college that shows that same course. And we do a comparison of titles and grades to make sure everything checks out, just like we do with the core course worksheets and the homeschool transcripts. I do want to point out, this is a really important thing, that no core course worksheets are required for dual enrollment courses. The reason for this is the dual enrollment course is being taught at the college by the college professors, and they are the ones responsible for the instruction, the assessment, the curriculum, planning, all that stuff. And so we don't consider that a homeschool course. We consider that a course taught by the college. And so they are the ones responsible for all that information. So we don't expect for you to fill out a core course worksheet for those types of courses. Okay, a couple reminders I want to go through specific to the documents that we just went through. Remember, that's the homeschool transcript, that's the administrator accordance statement, and then obviously those core course worksheets, whether they be the regular core course worksheets or the non-traditional core course worksheets. Number one, super important. Please, please, please use the forms created by the NCAA Eligibility Center. We will not accept self-created forms. The only self-created form, and it's technically not even a form, is the transcript. That you may create on your own. It is not a template or a form that we publish. However, the worksheets and the admin statements need to be our forms. They're actually, we have just done a great rebrand. They are editable PDFs. They are so much easier to type in, print out, upload. You can handwrite them if that's easier for you and upload them, but they need to be on those forms. If they're not on those forms, we will assign a task requesting that you resubmit on those forms. Since it has to be on the form, I think it goes without saying, but complete them in their entirety. Please don't modify, edit, change any form. If you remove a section, we're just going to go back and ask you to complete the actual form and provide the section that you removed. Super important that you make sure that these documents are signed by the parent or guardian. If they're not, they will be deemed unofficial, and we will retask and ask for those to be resubmitted with the appropriate signatures. The one exception, and I've said this a couple times, is that transcript. If you're using an umbrella provider to create your transcript, you are more than welcome to provide that transcript from them directly, and the signature from the individual at the umbrella program is sufficient. If you're creating your own transcript, then obviously we would expect the parent or guardian signature on that transcript. Also, it's super important not to include embedded links in your documentation. There's several reasons for this, but more often than not, the reason is the links break and then we can't access the information and then we have to ask for it again. So don't do that. And then also the last thing I want to highlight is that it's super important that if a document is deemed either unofficial, incomplete, or insufficient, we will assign a task to explain what the issue with the document is and then what needs to be corrected. And then in assigning that task, there will be a link to the form again that you can complete and resubmit. Typically, this doesn't happen a lot, but we want to make sure that if we're saying something doesn't meet our requirements, we're clear as to what the issue is so that we don't have to go back and forth and create a lot of headache for y'all, that we can just be very clear. Hey, this didn't contain a parent signature, so please submit with a parent signature. Or, hey, you forgot to put the credit awarded on this form. Please include the credit awarded. We'll always tell you what the issue was in that task so that you can respond with the missing information. In terms of the best practices for how to provide documents, best practice is email as an attachment. Email is the quickest, fastest way to get the document reviewed, coded, and into your student's account. You are more than welcome to send via standard delivery, overnight, or express mail. However, as you know, when you put something in the mail, there's going to be a delay from the time the mail is received, it's sent, and then it's processed. The email is the best, quickest, fastest way to get a document in front of our team and reviewed. It's important to note that we cannot accept documents via Adobe EchoSign or Dropbox. If that happens, we'll just reopen a task requesting those documents that you provided in that way. It is important to note that a parent or guardian or a homeschool umbrella program can submit the transcript. So if a parent is creating the transcript, they're more than welcome to email us the transcript. If they use an umbrella program, the umbrella program can email it to us directly, or if the parent has possession of the umbrella transcript, they could also email them that themselves as well. All other homeschool documentation besides the transcript has to come directly from the homeschool administrator. And the way we check that is we look at the emails that the students register. There's an email and then there's an alternate email. And so those would need to match. Or on that accordance administrator statement, there's a space in there for email address as well. We could match that as well. So we're looking for one of those emails that we have on file to match from the sender. If for some reason we receive an email from an unverified sender, we would mark it as unofficial and we would re-request that information. Super important, and I know Matt talked about your 10-digit NCAA ID that you get when you register, is you want to make sure you're including that ID number on all your documents. It makes it much faster for our mail processing team to code those documents and get them into your student's account. So make sure that you're including that on your transcripts, your admin statement, and then also on your core course worksheets, whether they be the regular ones or the non-traditional ones. So now we're going to transition into the resources that are available to you. Matt, if you want to go ahead and advance to the next slide. I want to remind you that you can continue to drop questions in the chat, and also that all of these links that are highlighted, that nice blue color, those are clickable. Once you receive the email with this presentation attached, you'll have access to click and it will take you directly to all these resources. First and foremost is that homeschool toolkit I mentioned previously. Like I said, we just rolled out the new version this August. You may notice that it has less pages. That's not necessarily meaning that information has been removed, but instead we are linking the information within. So there's less pages to flip through, but you still have the ability to click. And we've also removed some of the redundancies. If we've said something multiple times throughout the toolkit, we're putting it in one spot. So if you're a parent who's seen this toolkit many times because you've had several children go through this process, or you are familiar with it because you've looked at it prior to this presentation, you might see a slight change. The policies and procedures are still the same. We've just streamlined it to make it easier and clearer for parents to use. Also linked here are the initial eligibility flyers. This is the information that Matt shared with you in his portion of the presentation, talking about those Division I, Division II initial eligibility requirements, so 16 core courses and the required GPA. And then there's also a Division III amateurism flyer if that's the direction that your student athlete is choosing. There's also some information on students who meet the education impacting disabilities requirements. So you're more than welcome to access that information to see the requirements and the options available to those students. And then lastly, probably one of the most important things other than the toolkit is the link in order to register. Remember, Matt said, we encourage students to register as early as 9th grade, but obviously you can register at any time. And if you're not really sure if Division I, Division II, or Division III is your option, or even if like playing at the next level is really what you want to do, you can always start with that free profile account and you can always transition at any time to a certification account should you be getting active recruitment from Division I or Division II universities. So we'll go ahead and transition on. Here are links to all of our, QRs to all of our social media. One thing I will always say about homeschool parents is they are on top of it when it comes to social media. They're always following us on Twitter, Facebook, so we really appreciate that. We know you have a lot of your own Facebook groups, so we love it when you retweet or repost information that we're sharing. We're all here to help student athletes get to that next level if that's their desired outcome. So we appreciate the partnership that you share with us in sharing our information. So if you're not already following us, I would encourage you to scan any of these codes and follow us moving forward. There'll be lots of great information specific to homeschool students, but also specific to student athletes in general. Best practices about recruiting, about student athlete well-being. There's just so much good information we provide to student athletes at the high school level that would be important for you to follow throughout the year. And then finally, I'm going to say thank you for joining us. We're super excited today that you joined us. This is the first time we've actually done a webinar specific for our homeschool folks. You guys have been asking for it, so we heard the demand. We got right on it. We're super excited. We're hoping to get good feedback so that perhaps we can continue to do these moving forward, maybe in the spring. I do want to point out to you that the QR code that you see on your screen right now is actually, if you scan it, it will create a contact in your phone. that will contact you with the phone number that you see here. So it'll be saved in your iPhone or whatever type of digital phone that you're using, so that if you do need to give us a call, you have that number available at the tip of your fingers, rather than, I don't know about you, but having to like rush to Google and figure out what that number is again. There is a phone line that's available for college-bound student athletes, but obviously as their homeschool administrators, their parents or guardians, you're more than welcome to use that line to call and ask questions. I know that this can be a very daunting task. So don't be afraid to pick up the phone and call and ask a question. There's no such thing as a dumb question. It's a question you're just trying to clarify because you're trying to do right by your students. So we are happy to field in, answer any questions that you might have. That said, I'm going to pause. I think we are good. I'm waiting to see if I'm getting any updates from our tech team. Well, once again, thank you for joining us today. We hope you have a very good rest of your day and a happy holiday. And as we said previously, this information will be available. It'll be emailed to you, and it will also be posted on our website. So that way, if other individuals were not able to join, they will have access as well.